Lissa, you did it. All right, let me go ahead and unmute you here. Or you can unmute yourself. If you see the little microphone icon at the bottom of your screen, that should get you unmuted there. All right, well, Lissa is unmuting herself. Hello, everyone. Hi there, Mike.
Hey, everyone.
How's it going?
Awesome. Super excited to be here.
Excited to have you. All right, Lissa, so I see you said I do, but it's saying no mic detected. So is it saying that, Lissa, when you are trying to, what do you see on your screen right now? Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. So Google Chrome, we had speakers from the last banking panel where they had to sign in on Edge, Microsoft Edge, instead of Google Chrome. But let's have you try on your other computer first, and then we'll see. Thank you, Shannon. That's helpful. All right, good people. So while we get Lissa situated here, we have Mike. Let me ping one other speaker that we are waiting on, and then we will get started. We are winding down for the day. This is our second to last panel. Our last panel is all things compliance. So I'm super excited to kick off marketing and media. It's one of those areas that I have learned about being a co-founder where you have to do everything. Media, knowing who to reach out to, how to get publications, all of that has been such a blur prior to myself being an entrepreneur. So I'm super excited to hear from Lissa, Mike, and Christy when she joins about their experience in the cannabis industry within those sectors. So let me just send a quick message to my third speaker here, and then we will get going. Thanks for your patience here, guys. All right. All right, Lissa, how's it going over there? Let's see. Mike is still gray. All right, Ryan, I'm going to tag my program manager to see if she can help troubleshoot here and see if we can figure out your audio. Colleen, I know I feel like I've been everywhere. I feel like I have a set of triplets of me. Okay, Lissa, you just got your password reset. No problem. Okay, Danielle. Awesome. Hey there, Christy. Can you try unmuting yourself? Let's see. Can't hear you, Christy, if you're talking. Lots of audio issues today. Yeah, I see that you're also on mute as well. We're having the same issue with Lissa, though, where I'm wondering if we need to get you guys. Christy, are you using, let's see, are you using Chrome by chance? Okay. Is it possible for you guys to try, either of you have Microsoft Edge? Can you try logging in using Microsoft Edge? We had to have our last speakers do the same thing. And then Lissa, if you could do that as well. So, all right, ladies, try downloading Edge if you don't have it already, and then we'll try to get you going. Lewis, who is on here, Danielle, who's also will help you troubleshoot. Lewis and Danielle, if you could help Lissa and Chrissy. I think we might be having some of the same issues that we were having with the last panel. It looks like Lissa is already on Edge, so we will see what happens there. But in the meantime, Mike, I guess it's your show for right now. Let's just for a little while, ladies.
I'm nervous.
Audio back on. So let's just start off with a couple of quick intros here. Like Colleen said, I know you guys have seen my face today. You're probably tired of seeing my face, but just one more time. I'm going to do a quick intro. I'm Cree Robinson. I'm one of the co-founders of Tucana, which is one of the organizers of this event. Tucana is a software company, an operations management platform for dispensaries. We put on this event with Vangst. Super excited to be here. I am joined by a lovely panel of experts in marketing and media in the cannabis industry. And like I was saying earlier, this is super exciting for me because marketing and media is something that I knew nothing about before becoming an entrepreneur. So I'm super excited to jump in here. So Mike is one of the first people that we connected with on our Cannapreneur journey. So Mike, if you wouldn't mind giving us an intro, tell us who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Yeah, first and foremost, happy Saturday, and it's super exciting to be here with everybody, and congratulations on the launch of Tucana. I'm the founder of Green Lane Communication, a cannabis-focused PR firm that's focused on connecting cannabis leaders to earned media and press opportunities, ultimately with the end goal of helping brands and industry leaders amplify brand awareness, build trust, and establish credibility. And I'm heading on, I would say, year 3 of my Cannapreneur journey. So it's an exciting one, and it's one that I wouldn't trade for anything. And I'm just super excited to be here and to be surrounded by everybody who's a part of this event today. And thank you for having me, Cree.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mike. So yeah, a lot to dive in here. Mike has a podcast, and I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit as well. We were on a podcast. Mike played an integral role in getting us into Green Entrepreneur Magazine early on in our entrepreneurship journey. So he is doing some big things. If you need PR opportunities, press opportunities, definitely reach out to Mike. Even though Mike is not in Michigan, we're in Michigan and he's not, and he was able to work with us. So he goes nationwide. So definitely he is your guy. So that's enough promotion for me. I will calm down there. But really quickly here, Lissa, are we still having some mic issues here? Yes, let's see. All right. I will have either Louis or Danielle, can you reach out to Lissa via the Slack channel and try to troubleshoot with her that way? That would be awesome. But while we're working on that, Mike, can you tell us exactly what PR is in a couple sentences?
Yeah, so I always like to use this comparison, and it's when advertising is when you tell the world that you're the best at what you do, and public relations is when somebody else tells the world that you are the best at what you do. And so public relations can take form in many different ways. It can be, there's a number of different things that fall under that realm, right? Social media marketing, event marketing, media relations. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today falls under public relations. It's how you're perceived publicly. It's how people remember you. And so there's a lot of different facets of it. But that analogy is one that I like to give because it just really defines the difference between advertising and public relations, which is something that people tend to confuse sometimes. And that's really just the best way that I like to describe what public relations is and how it works.
When it comes to, I guess in both components, but it sounds like there's some storytelling that's involved in PR. So can you talk a little bit about how you use storytelling in order to kind of advertise for companies or bring them to the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as humans, I think we're all just, naturally storytelling creatures, right? We've always just been gravitating towards stories in order to communicate and get our messages and points across. And so I always like to stress the fact that having a narrative or just having a story behind your brand and something that makes it very easy for folks to follow along and to understand and to digest and understand, not only who you are and what you do, but also why you do it. And so it's really important to dial in what those things are, but then it's also going to be very important for you to actively tell that story. And that is a culmination of things like taking advantage of social media, taking advantage of events, just like this particular one that you've put together today. Interviewing with editors, reporters, journalists, jumping onto other people's podcasts, having your own podcast, right? And so it's actively telling that story before somebody, accidentally tries to tell that story for you. And so that's a very, very critical part, that you want to make sure that you tell that story before somebody else tells it, where it may not be correct, or they might not have the best idea of who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
That's such a good point, because as we know, especially with social media now, it's easy for someone to hop on and tell your story in a way that you might not want it to be told. So I think that is a very, very important point. Thank you, Mike. All right, here, Lissa, I hear you now. It looks like we are here.
You can actually hear me?
We can actually hear you.
Wonderful. Don't say I didn't warn you.
No, you're fine. Let me just quickly test with Christy here. Can you try unmuting yourself, Christy? We are still having some issues there. Christy, might you be able to, it looks like you're on your phone, Lissa.
No, I'm on a laptop.
Oh, you're on your laptop. Okay. Christy, maybe try joining on your phone if possible and seeing if that works here. Are you using Edge now? You are using Edge. Okay. Can you do me a favor, Christy? If you could text me, I am going to connect you, and maybe you and either Louie or Danielle can hop on a quick call and do some troubleshooting there. If you could text me, and then I will forward your number over to both of them. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Lissa, now that we have you, thank you so much. Can you give us a quick intro? Tell us who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Sure. My name is Lissa Satori. I am the marketing manager for all of the Curaleaf brands for both Ohio and Michigan. Originally Ohio girl, I now live in Michigan and spend my days chatting with folks on the phone and touring around the state. So.
Thank you. Appreciate that intro. And I did not realize you were originally from Ohio. Welcome back, or welcome to Michigan. So, question for you. So, marketing is one of those things where I think, a lot of folks have an understanding of what marketing is, but I think a lot of folks don't. So could you tell us what marketing is to you in a couple sentences?
So marketing to me is really being the ambassadors of our industry to the public. And it's not just to the public that utilizes our products and services. It's also to those who may not know a lot about our industry or may have some negative feelings about our industry. So our job is very important as marketers to talk to the public on behalf of our industry.
I love that. And I think you touched too, and it's something that I think both of you have to navigate from a PR perspective, from a marketing perspective, is the stigma of our industry still. I think we're so deep into it. Sometimes I think, at least I forget that there are still these negative stigmas. So kind of how do you combat that in your storytelling? Mike, let's start with you.
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it comes down to just being professional and being a mirror image of what we want to be understood as, right? I mean, to Lisa's point, there are a lot of stigmas that still surround cannabis and the folks that play in this arena. And so I just think the more professional that we can be, and the more just responsible we can be with the way we go about certain things, and communicating in a way that makes it easy for people to understand why we're doing what we're doing, right? If there's a medical dispensary and its goal is to help treat certain ailments for patients, it's important that we communicate that, right? And I think, Lisa, I'm sure you're very familiar with this. It's just important to be very professional and to be very clear cut and to be straight to the point, so that people know what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and also how you're going to do it in the best possible way. And for example, if you have an entire support staff of pharmacists or nurses or medical professionals helping you, and you have data to back up your point, putting all that together and doing it the right way is going to make it a lot easier for folks to look at us as an industry, as a whole, as a collective, and say, you know what, we are doing something that's incredibly important, and we are going to, leave our stamp in history. And so I think it's just how we go about what we're doing, and doing so in the right way, where a lot of people can just understand what that is. I think that's one of the most critical parts about marketing, about PR. It's because we're kind of writing that narrative, not just for our brands that we represent or just the people that we work with, but for the entire cannabis community, both adult use and medical.
I think that's something that is changing. I think, the way that people look at cannabis and its medicinal uses, I think, is changing in a positive way. But with that being said, would you say that it's easier now to get cannabis news articles placed? Is it more difficult? Kind of, what's that climate like?
Yeah, I think it's definitely starting to become more acceptable. And I think, to a certain extent, what's held true before still holds true today, which is, as long as you have data and sound evidence to support your case, or your media pitch, that's going to hold so much weight. And so that's held true before, and it holds true today still. So as long as you have something to support your pitch or your story or your angle, whatever it may be, and as long as it's relevant to what's going on in the current climate, as far as, we'll use legalization as an example, if what you're pitching is relevant and there's a lot of data and support to back it up, that's going to help it immensely. But overall, I definitely see that there is a lot more acceptance, and people do want to learn more about cannabis and who the game changers are in the space. And so it's definitely becoming a little bit easier to communicate with media folks about the topic and have that conversation.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. And I know it's probably still challenging, but I'm glad to hear that it is getting a little easier. So with that said, for you, Lisa, what are some challenges that you face in your role?
So something that I found kind of interesting this year is, part of my role, there's a CSR component to it. So I direct a lot of the funds that we utilize in our states to deal with issues of social equity and community outreach. And even here in 2021, this year, as I was reaching out to different organizations to try and get them to take our money and to take our donations, it's really interesting to me still how often I get told no, that they cannot actually associate with a cannabis company, whether that be due to worries about federal funding, or just because they have a board member on the board of their organization that hasn't had someone share a personal experience they've had in cannabis that has really touched them yet. And that's what I really think is the deciding factor, after almost a decade of talking to patients, regulators, politicians, the whole gamut, is when someone can actually draw a connection to someone they care about and a personal experience that that person has had with cannabis. That makes all the difference in the entire world. That is what changes hearts and minds. And that's also part of marketing, not only, helping to influence consumers and behavior, but also in this industry to really do some education and to help bring us into mainstream and out of the closet.
I think that is such an important point too. And I think back to you, Mike, we'll get to this in a second. When I asked you when we first met and you talked about your first experience with cannabis, you talked about how you met someone, I believe it was in a dispensary, and you saw the difference in how he felt before and after the product. And those types of experiences really just change you. Those are the types of things I think that make people that are hesitant about cannabis believe in the product, believe in the plant. So Mike, could you just quickly tell us what that story was so folks know what I'm referencing?
Yeah, of course. So I was in a hemp wellness center here in New York, and I was chatting with the owner, and all of a sudden in comes an older gentleman suffering from really debilitating tremors. I mean, he couldn't even open the door. He couldn't even speak or formulate sentences or anything like that. And so his wife walked over to the owner and was just like, listen, we're desperate. Like, we need something to get his life back. And nothing has worked, which a lot of folks in cannabis have, heard this narrative and this story over and over again. And she was just like, okay, why don't we do this? You two make yourselves feel comfortable, hang out for 5 to 10 minutes. I have a tincture that I think will probably help. Worst case scenario, nothing happens. Best case scenario, you feel a little bit better, and we take it from there. And so the gentleman took the sample of the tincture. What felt like maybe 2-3 minutes that went by, all of a sudden his tremor subsided by what seemed like 70%. I mean, he just totally regained control of his body. He was able to speak again. He was able to sit down and not be just shaking and feeling like he didn't have control. And it was the most incredible thing. I get goosebumps telling it every time. And it was the best thing ever, because the whole vibe of the store was just very sad. And it was just like, nobody deserves to live a life like this. And then it was almost like with the blink of an eye, the first words that came out of his mouth were, I need the biggest bottle of whatever shit it was you just gave me. And everybody erupted laughing. And it was such a beautiful, joyful moment. And from that moment on, I was just like, okay, I need to figure out how I can help leaders like that hemp wellness center owner, how I can put the spotlight on her, because she's really doing something for this entire community and for the patients that are a part of it. And ever since then, that's really what kind of drew me to be a part of the industry. Because I've read papers, I've watched videos, I've watched documentaries, but I think, like many of us, until we actually see something like that happen right in front of our eyes, or happen to a very close family member or friend, it's a totally different life-changing experience.
And it's one of those things where, like you said, until you experience it, you can, like hearing that's an amazing story. And I've had, my own personal experiences, but until you live it, it's hard to just conceptualize what that impact is like. Let me just do a quick test here. Christy, can you unmute yourself and see if we can hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yay! I'm in.
We can hear you. So give us, and Lisa, I want to hop back to you in a second, but before we do, Christy, can you give us a quick intro? Tell us who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Christy Price. I am the founder of Black Cannabis magazine. I am in Texas. And Black Cannabis is like the premier business-to-business magazine for people of color who are doing business in the industry. So,
awesome.
And in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you, Christy. Can't wait to pick your brain about that in a little bit.
Sure.
To hop back to Lissa quickly here, because Lissa, you mentioned, it sounds like your role is not a textbook marketing role. It sounds like you kind of do, it's kind of like a hybrid role from what it sounds like. So could you give us like a day in the life of what you do at Curaleaf? What does a typical day look like?
So a typical day for me is going to include phone call after phone call. And those phone calls are going to range from talking to local governments about getting involved with programs that they have going on, to vendors trying to sell me digital ads and print ads out the wazoo. I spend a lot of time talking to potential partners. For example, the Kalamazoo State Theater and theaters like that, where we have developed partnerships. And then also developing people in teams. There are groups that I work with that do things like field marketing, brand ambassador type work, And so I help to direct those teams as well as to strategize overall goals and figuring out the steps to get there in both states. So a little bit of everything, you're right.
A little bit of everything, and it sounds like there's a lot of relationship management that has to take place there with talking to governments, talking to partners, talking to vendors, a lot of management in that way. And I want to direct that question over to Christy. So you have Black Cannabis Business Magazine, where it sounds like a lot of that is relationships, building relationships with businesses, other writers. So can you tell me a little bit about the team that you work with at Black Cannabis Business Magazine?
Sure. So Black Cannabis Business is actually digital. So we're not a print magazine yet. So I have a content creation team who primarily helps me with my social media and with my weekly newsletter. And then I also, so we're kind of split. So we have our content and editorial team, and then we also have our event team. Because as you know, Cree, we're pretty big into doing events. And so this year I actually added team members. I don't know if anyone is watching. They said they might hop on today. But now I have an event team. So now I have people who are dedicated to planning and organizing our conferences. So now that we're going in person, and last year we were virtual, this year we're going to be face to face. So I needed a couple of hands to help me prepare for those types of events. So that's primarily how my team is made up.
I love it. So Christy, there's so many different things to cover in the cannabis industry right now. There's the culinary side of things, there's tech, there's legalization, there's so many things. So how does your team come up with the content that they cover on your digital magazine?
So every year during business planning, we create our content calendar, which basically just talks about what we're going to talk about each month, like really high level. And then sometimes we send the content calendar or the editorial calendar out to publicists and marketers and, business owners that we know, just to kind of give them an idea of what we're planning so they can kind of get in where they fit in. If they see the month, like if one month we're talking about medical, one month we're talking about tech, another month we're talking about CBD. And so the business owners and the brands who are interested in providing content during that time frame will let us know. Otherwise, we kind of do our own research to figure out like what's the buzz. We do a lot of social media, and Cree, as you know, we have a lot of relationships with lots of people of color who are doing business right now in the industry. So we're lucky that a lot of people reach out to us. So that makes our job a little bit easier. But that's primarily how we kind of come up with our content. The other thing that we do, so when people join our newsletter, I think it's the second, so we have like a little welcome sequence that we do. I want to think it's the second one, we have a survey where we kind of ask our subscribers some questions about, what they were doing before cannabis, why they want to do cannabis now, like what their goals are and that kind of thing, what they're interested in learning more about. So a part of it is, just us knowing the industry and knowing what we're hearing and coming up with themes and topics that we want to cover for the month. And then the other part is, people telling us like, hey, I'm interested in this. I'd like to see more, hear more about this particular topic. So kind of a hybrid approach to content development.
I love that. And if we could do like a lightning round here, we have to wrap up here shortly. But I'm really curious. You guys have very diverse kind of roles and things that you do now. So I'm really curious to know what you guys did before you do what you do now. So we'll start off with you, Mike. What were you doing before you started Green Lane Communication?
So I was basically doing the same exact thing, but I was working in book publishing, and I was working specifically with nonfiction business book authors who typically wanted to put out a book, not necessarily to sell millions of copies and make money that way, but more so of like a brand equity play to develop their thought leadership, their personal brand. And then ultimately, of course, money's important. So they would want to get up on stage and do keynote speeches and get into consulting and coaching and things like that. So that was the world I played in before cannabis. But again, I had that experience at the Hemp Wellness Center, and I said, you know what, I love what I'm doing, but I want to move it over into cannabis. And so that's how I got in.
That's a perfect example of what I've been preaching about the entire conference here, is taking what you already know and bringing it to the cannabis industry. Lissa, how about you? What were you doing before this lightning round here?
So I spent a lot of time doing outside sales, but about a decade ago, I got really angry about prohibition and the lack of access. And so I've spent my last 10 years developing grassroots organizations and doing a bunch of volunteer work in order to change laws and end prohibition. I worked for Marijuana Policy Project in Ohio and then was part of the campaign team up here in Michigan that passed the adult use law. And immediately prior to this engagement with Curaleaf, I spent about a year as the director of Focus, which is the foundation of Cannabis Unified Standards.
Awesome. So definitely you also were able to bring your experience and what you did prior to now over to the cannabis industry. I love when that happens because a lot of times I don't know if people believe me when I say you can literally do what you're doing now. And I think people kind of roll their eyes sometimes. So perfect examples there. And then while we're wrapping up with Christy, Mike, and Lissa, if you wouldn't mind dropping the best method of contact in the chat here so that folks can follow up with you, that would be amazing. And Christy, what were you doing before you started Black Cannabis magazine?
Yeah. I want to be careful that it's Black Cannabis and not Black Cannabis, because there is a Black Cannabis. It's an excellent, more cultural type magazine. Black Cannabis, again, is like kind of B2B, so we're focused on entrepreneurship and business ownership. So prior to Black Cannabis, I was working in the other vices. I spent about 15 years in alcohol. And then I spent about 8 years in tobacco. And so both of those industries were very similar, of course, to cannabis, and that they're formally prohibited and had a lot of some of the same regulatory challenges. So saw a really great opportunity in the cannabis to kind of bring some of that, like you're saying, create, some of the things that you learn about working in, other formally prohibited industries. You can, there are like nuances to that kind of work. So it just makes sense to, to transfer it over to Black Cannabis. And then the other thing, similar to what Lisa said, you're working so long and then you start to get frustrated with some things that you see. And so in both tobacco and in alcohol, when the opportunities were becoming available for business ownership, when those industries came online, Black people and people of color were kind of shut out because either we were slaves or it was segregated, or we were all hearing about the Tulsa massacres and things like that, and like that, like now. So for me, it was a matter of changing the narrative about how we participate in these industries, particularly in the ones that, we have a really big hand in helping to develop. So that was my goal in founding Black Cannabis, and to, continue to do my part to make sure that we, or people of color, have a fair shot and have the information and that they need to be successful.
And so here you have it, guys. 3 people who are doing amazing things in the industry, who are so necessary, getting stories out about cannabis, impacting change, changing policies. We need folks like you in the industry. You are part of what drives the industry forward. Thank you so much. Our time is up, unfortunately, but they have put their contact info in the chat. And if you guys don't mind heading over to the networking panel, if attendees want to chat with you further, that would be amazing. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of the career fair, and hopefully we will see you at the social hour in a little bit. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Cree.
Bye.
Thanks, Cree.
Bye, Mike.
Bye, everyone.